Hello, everyone, it's Yoko here. On this channel, I often feel that information about what's happening in China isn't accurately reaching countries other than China. So, I've been collecting information from various sources and sharing it in English. I gather information from multiple media outlets, so I'd appreciate your comments and opinions about the content of these videos. Also, English is not my native language, so I'm using an AI speaker to ensure I convey the information accurately. If you enjoy this content, please consider subscribing to the channel and supporting it. Today, I'm talking about the fate of a person who overestimated the Chinese Communist Party. Currently, in China, the real estate market is in the midst of a bubble collapse, and it has become a tremendous mess. In Japan, many people are aware that large corporations are facing significant problems due to this situation. In China, there are numerous real estate development companies similar to these large corporations. This is because there were too many development companies, and they produced more properties than there was demand for. This outcome was foreseeable for quite some time. By the way, originally, Chinese real estate development companies were doing entirely different things. Still, they entered the real estate development business later, even if it wasn't related to their core business because it was lucrative. Real estate development, especially for local governments in China, was like alchemy. Just by leasing the land they controlled, enormous sums of money poured in, and the government supported real estate development. It was objectively evident to anyone that creating an excess of properties with no future demand would lead to a crisis. However, local governments and businesses were caught in a cycle of excessive development. Chinese real estate developers knew the system and were drawing funds from banks, disregarding future demand. Eventually, the Communist Party realized this was risky, so they imposed regulations, mainly because in China, banks, especially the major ones, are state-owned, and banks are under the influence of the Communist Party. They restricted direct lending from banks. Instead, they encouraged financial products for the general public. Still, many people overestimated the Communist Party's ability to handle the situation and believed they would intervene in case of a crisis. So, even though many had seen this coming for years, they thought it would be okay. Around the time before the COVID-19 pandemic, concerns about China's real estate sector were already widespread. The reason for this was that the cost of corporate financing was skyrocketing. Basically, those lending money were cautious and demanded high interest rates. However, real estate developers, who had no other sources of funds, were willing to pay over 10% annual interest. Some thought it was time to sell their properties for a high price because the Communist Party would intervene if the bubble burst, which was not a common belief in countries like Japan or the United States. Amidst all this, there was a man who actively invested in China's real estate sector, and his last name is Ka. The name is likely fictional for privacy reasons. He claimed to have turned 300,000 yen into over 1 billion yen through stock trading when he was 28 years old. At today's exchange rate, 300,000 yen is roughly around 6 million yen, and 1 billion yen is about 20 billion yen. He was known as a charismatic figure in the world of stock trading. Such stories are not uncommon, where individuals claim to have made massive profits, starting with a small sum of money. It attracts people who are looking to replicate their success, often taking advantage of the less informed. Ka had around 100,000 followers on social media, which isn't considered a large number in China, but it's a considerable audience. However, if these followers were very dedicated and he had been gathering them with the intention to deceive from the beginning, it could still be quite a substantial number. It's worth mentioning that this person may also be a front. Large-scale fraud schemes typically require initial capital, and having someone in the front, who follows orders, while others provide the funds in the background, is a common tactic. In the end, it's unclear whether Ka had created this scheme on his own or if there was a larger organization behind him. Unfortunately, there is no public information available regarding his fate. Your opinions and comments on what might have happened are welcome in the comment section. To get back to the story, this individual had some unique ideas. They claimed that investment was a form of life training, and they gathered followers with this belief. But that's not all. They were also running a private equity fund, specifically investing the money they collected to generate profits and return them to the investors. Usually, when you hear private equity fund, you might think of investments in unlisted companies. However, this person was heavily investing in the real estate sector. Furthermore, when they collected money, they had a restriction that it couldn't be withdrawn for 3 years. This approach isn't particularly unique, and it's something that's seen in places like the United States as well. Long-term investment in funds is quite common. The idea is that funds are locked in for an extended period, and this money is used for various investments to grow profits, eventually returning them to investors. In this case, the major portion of the investments was funneled into the real estate sector. There was indeed a time when the real estate industry in China was booming. As I mentioned earlier, the real estate sector in China, being backed by local governments and forming a mutually beneficial relationship, was considered a government-backed sector, and many believed it wouldn't fail. However, in 2020, due to investments in real estate stocks and concerns surrounding COVID-19, some people experienced significant losses. But after the pandemic, there was hope, with no real basis, that large conglomerates like Evergrande would make a comeback. Some even believed that Evergrande's stock trading, which had been halted, would resume and that the Communist Party would come to its rescue. Those who had been watching the broader economic picture in China, however, were aware of the size of Evergrande's debts. Even if the Communist Party wanted to help, it was practically impossible. So, what the Chinese government is considering now is how to prevent the fallout from Evergrande's troubles from spreading and causing a more significant crisis. Many individuals have invested in Evergrande, and the company has lent money to various parties, including banks and significant companies. The government must prioritize whom to help because they can't save everyone. Ordinary investors will likely be left to bear the losses. Still, there were those who invested in Evergrande's stock, causing it to temporarily rise. Some people even thought this would lead to a broader surge in Chinese stocks. Those who have been following China's economic situation for some time knew that this stock surge was not sustainable. What happened afterward was that the de facto head of Evergrande, Xu Jiayin, was detained, and Evergrande stock trading was halted once again. In the shadows of these events, the operator of the car fund I mentioned earlier took their own life quietly. This individual was previously known as China's Buffett but turned out to have a different reality. Ultimately, this person's investment strategy was entirely different from Buffett's. In China, the belief was that funds would flow into sectors with government support, but that was more of an early narrative. When the Communist Party backs something, people flock to it, leading to oversupply. The main issue is the price competition. Companies strive to make products cheaper. Those who can make EVs more affordably are now considering exporting them to other countries. This has led to intense competition in China. When prices become highly competitive, you see many companies, including ones that have no prior experience in the automotive industry, entering the market. While it's well known that various conglomerates in China are involved in electric vehicle production, other less known players are also participating. The result is an oversaturated market. Exporting electric vehicles to other countries is a way to cope with the pressure within China. However, when exports face pressure, you have a situation like the real estate sector where there is an oversupply. China has the capacity to produce a considerable number of electric vehicles annually, but without sufficient overseas demand, in the long run, the market could face an oversupply issue. That's why people who have been observing the situation in China expect this outcome. This concludes our discussion for now. I look forward to seeing you in the next video.